may not have experienced anything like that for thousands of years. What is has your research taken you into the change in Mayan calendar? What we can expect for the 2012?
Well, there are several things going on that affect our solar system. There is the famous story that's predicted by the Mayans that 2012 would be the end of time. And I think that there really isn't anything to worry about relative to that. The Mayans were great astronomers, but they didn't have telescopes, so their observations weren't all that precise by today's standards. And the coincidence in the sky that they predicted that would occur on December 20th of this year actually occurred 4 years ago or more. So whatever catastrophe they expected to end time has already passed, and it didn't end our time. So I think it's nothing that we should be worried about now. On the other hand, there are other factors going on. So the sun is orbiting the Milky Way galaxy, and as it does so, it changes its position relative to other things in the galaxy. And we are currently in a relative, in a cloud of gas that surrounds the solar system, and we have been for about 100,000 years, and we will eventually emerge from that cloud, and that will change the impact of the sun's magnetic field. People really don't know enough at this point to understand how substantial that effect will be on life on Earth, but these things do change periodically over time, and some of them are foreseen, and some of them come as great surprises. So we live in a universe which is very interesting, and interesting isn't always safe.
That's true here. Hang on a second. I'm still trying to bring up. I've lost a lot of my channels here, and let me try to get one of them back anyway, or a couple of them back here. Just a moment here. I have to put in a little bit of code here, so. Oops. Now let me back on a couple of these channels here. So my apologies if you were listening on that channel we got dropped here. What about the now I got a report that the sun, they're expecting sunspot activities, and is that the report that I got is that the IRS computer shut down from one of these sunspots. Are we facing any danger from EMP from the sun, or is this another form of warfare that people are using against us?
Well, the sun goes through changes in its magnetic field every 11 or so years. It's not exactly a fixed cycle, but it happens on a semi-regular basis. And what that means is that the north magnetic pole and the south magnetic pole of the sun switch. And that happens at a time when the sunspot activity is at its greatest level. So we go through periods in which there are a lot of sunspots and turbulence in the sun's magnetic field, separated by periods in which the sun is relatively calm. And this has happened in the past approximately once every 11 years. We are now starting to approach the maximum intensity of sunspots and the time in which the magnetic field will shift. So this is the period in which the emissions from the sun are the greatest that they are during its cycle. Solar wind and coronal mass ejections can impact Earth substantially. They can destroy our satellites in orbit that provide the GPS system and news communications and television and so forth. And they can also overload the power grid, as they did on the East Coast in Ottawa, Canada, about 15 years ago, leading to a massive power blackout over much of Northeast America. So these are things that have happened in the past and that they will happen in the future. We can't predict them with any great certainty, but it's something that we've lived through many times before, and we will again. There'll be a certain amount of damage, but we will recover.
So the end of the world ain't likely to happen, but
well,
what are we facing here, and what would we be doing from a scientific point of view? I want to get into more. You really analyzed and maybe found the God particle, haven't you? I would do. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, there's a couple things there, Clay. We could talk about the God particle, which has been recently discovered primarily by scientists in Europe, and we could also talk about what we all should be doing to address the critical issues facing society from a science point of view. And maybe we should talk about that one first, because that, I think, has the greatest impact on all of us.
I'd like to do that. Now, I've come up years ago, and I've done a lot to get government heat, from reporting on government drug dealing to presidential involvement in that kind of thing. And I came up after interviewing people from all over the world, from all walks of life. I came up to the conclusion that the best thing we could do is maybe what the Bible suggested, and that's come out of her. Come out of her. And if I figured, I came up with a plan called Liberty Villages, and I'm still working on an adaptation of that that other people have started. Similar moves have been made across the country. Smaller houses, growing your own food and generating your own energy. I figured if you could generate your own energy from what God gave us, the sun and the wind, and possibly more magnetics or some other Tesla type technology that got shelved because it didn't have a place to put the meter for the electric companies. But if you grow your own food and generate your own energy, and you live in smaller villages and neighborhoods where people work together, don't you have a better chance of surviving anything out there? And it also gives you the kind of independence that they really don't like if you've got a controlling type of government. What about it? What is that? That was the only answer I could come up with. Grow your own food, generate your own energy. And that's just from a practical. I asked how we survived 200 years ago, 300 years ago. How did we survive? There's never been a time in our history where it was easy to be free, has there?
I don't think so. I think humanity has always been a struggle. Well, my view on that, I mean, I share your sentiment that the key thing is energy. Energy production is at the foundation of the problems that society has, and the solution to that energy production would resolve the most important issues that we face. So I think what's wrong with energy production is that we're making energy with 19th century technology. And as a result, we're very inefficient, which makes the energy very expensive. So we are bankrupting our economy by the cost of the energy that we're producing. And at the same time, we're generating a fabulously large amount of pollution. So we are poisoning the air and the soil and the water in the process of being extremely inefficient in the way that we produce energy. Now, what's wrong with the way we produce energy? All forms of energy that we use ultimately are created by the conversion of mass into energy. And that's in accordance with Einstein's most famous equation, E equals mc squared. So Einstein said that mass is really just condensed energy. Every rock, every tree, even our hands, our whole bodies, are really just made of condensed energy. That's what everything is, Einstein said. And so, the amount of energy he had, per his equation, that's contained in a rock or anything else is fabulously large. It's unbelievably large amount of energy in every little stone, every pebble, every drop of water that we see around us. And nature knows how to convert that energy very efficiently. We don't. So when we take coal or gas or a piece of wood or anything else and we burn it to produce heat, we are converting less than 1/billionth of that mass into energy, less than 1/billionth. Can you imagine if you were to start a business with the idea that you'd make 1 billion sales calls to get one order? I mean, that wouldn't make any sense, right? I mean,
right.
Who would do that? But that's what we do all the time when we produce energy. Less than 1/billionth of the mass is converted into useful work energy, and all the rest of it becomes pollution.
Matter of fact, I'm working right now with a gentleman, started a company that goes out and salvages old homes, old buildings, old barns, old apartment buildings. He salvages them, especially if they've been, if they were created over 50 years ago. And he's got a whole philosophy on salvage. He says that you know, our best wood, our best materials and everything were used 100 years ago. Let me jump back 100 years. You've talked about Einstein, but we don't hear much about another gentleman that probably gave us as much or more than Einstein, and that would be Nikola Tesla. I recently went to a Tesla convention, and nobody had anything close to what Tesla was supposed to have created, free energy out of the air, and yet, and many people told me that it was actually against national security to create one of his devices. What can you tell us about it?
Well, I don't think that Tesla had any invention that creates energy from nothing. And in fact, nature doesn't permit energy to be created from nothing at all. Energy is a quantity that's conserved in nature, which is very firmly established by physics. It's been measured with extreme accuracy, and we're very confident of that. And that means that the total amount of energy in the universe today is the same as it was yesterday, and it is the same as it was at the beginning of time, and it's the same amount that's going to exist billions of years into the future. So we can convert energy from one form to another. As I was saying before, we can convert it, for instance, from mass energy into work energy. But you can't create it and you can't destroy it. So I like to call energy the currency of existence. Everything that exists and has a physical reality has energy in it, and the amount of energy that something has tells us how much of that stuff exists. So it's impossible to have energy come out of absolutely nothing, and it's impossible to destroy energy. But we can learn how to make energy vastly more efficiently than what we're doing. And if we do, the price of energy will be dramatically less than it is. It will be widely available. It will be clean to produce because we're not converting all of that mass into pollution. And we will solve the major problems that society is facing. The United States would have available to it as much as $2 trillion more every year to spend on the various issues that the citizens might want to support. instead of spending it creating pollution. So this would be the biggest advance in human society, in my view, since mankind learned to control fire.
Are we talking about working on the nano level? And I've seen some things with one company that set up or internet site that's set up to, I think it's ART, A-R-T or something like that. And they have discovered materials that you can put on glass or put on surfaces that absorb energy or generate some type of energy and convert it some way. What type of scientific discoveries are we talking about? I've also seen one gentleman that's talking about the U.S. is about to come into a lot of money from this oil shale, but that's still going back to the old type of drilling and production. We may have a lot of oil here, but the methods to remove it are still fracking and dangerous. What technology are you looking at that could solve this energy problem and really set people free? I've said possibly the reason the UFOs are so top secret is they simply don't want the average person to know that we could go to the moon for lunch without using a drop of gas. Could you address that, sir? What technology are you seeing in the future that could break us free from this control by the oil company or the banks that we seem to be under now?
Well, the technology already exists in nature. And the technology is called nuclear fusion. And in every star in the universe, nature is converting energy about 40 million times more efficiently than we do. So the stars in the sky, including our sun, are powered by nuclear fusion. And nuclear fusion is just taking small atoms and merging them together to make bigger atoms. So when the universe began, there were only two types of atoms in the universe, hydrogen and helium. And you can't make anything very interesting out of those two elements because they don't react much. At the beginning of the universe, there wasn't even a single atom of carbon anywhere in the entire universe, and not a single atom of oxygen anywhere in the entire universe. So it's the stars, through the process of nuclear fusion, that have produced all of those atoms that we have now on the periodic table, and all the atoms that you and I and everything else is made of. So this is the way nature produces energy, and this is the most natural phenomenon in the universe. Now, what's new, from our point of view, is that we finally have come up with a concept that makes this level of energy generation possible. It's not really a new invention. It's more a realization that you could put well-established processes in a certain sequence and end up creating an energy source that has this tens of millions of times higher efficiency. So that means we would need less than a millionth of the fuel we're now using to get the same amount of energy for our citizens. We would be generating 1,000,000 times less pollution in the process, and so the cost would be dramatically less, and it would be dramatically cleaner. And there's no real, we have to do some good engineering to make this thing work, but there's no great new miracle breakthroughs in science that are required. We just have to learn to do what nature does.
Now, a few years ago, or I guess it's been about 15 years ago, we had some scientists that came up with cold fusion, and they were pretty much shut down by the rest of the scientific community. What happened there? What was wrong with their research? What happened there?
Well, I think looking back on it, they probably achieved this process without knowing it. So the great tragedy for these guys and for society was that they leapt to the wrong conclusion about what they had discovered. So what they did was they had an experiment and they generated more heat output than they could possibly explain with any known chemical reaction. And if they had simply said, hey guys, we did this and more heat came out, why don't we all try to figure out what's going on? If they had done that, then we probably would have had this process 20 years ago. But they didn't understand what they were doing, and they jumped to the wrong conclusion about what they had achieved. And they made a claim that was scientifically untenable. It was just simply ridiculous claim. And there was a smell in all of this of financial impropriety. So the scientific community jumped on these guys like a ton of bricks and pounded them back into the ground, and the thing died. And that was very unfortunate because there was something there. They just gave it the wrong name. They called it something that it obviously wasn't. Now the problem here is that if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know which parameters to optimize. You don't know which knobs to turn to make it work better. And so when people tried to replicate what they did, not knowing what was the important aspect of the process, they didn't get the same results because it was extremely sensitive to how exactly you did it. And so without the understanding of what was going on, people couldn't replicate it, and they couldn't optimize it, and they couldn't make it into a commercially viable process. But what's new is that someone has figured that out. Someone has figured out the 3 steps in the process. Each of these 3 steps is well-established science, but what's new is they figured out that these 3 steps are come together in this process to make the whole thing work. And now that they've figured out what's going on, engineers and scientists can optimize the tuning of all of these little things that go into the experiment and get us the yields we need to make this a commercially viable product. And if it is, anybody can hold in their hand an energy source that will last them their whole lifetime. When we talk about independence and freedom, this is the ultimate expression of that. I mean, you'll be carrying around basically a battery that will never need replacement, and they could run your car or heat your house or cook your food or whatever you want to do. It'll be an entirely different universe that we'll be living in if we can make this work.
You're saying a device can be made that you could safely hold in your hand that would generate enough power to run your automobiles or your home?
Yeah. It would be millions of times more powerful than dynamite, but it would be completely safe. It would have no radioactive emissions. It would have no chemical toxic waste emissions. It would have no greenhouse gas emissions. The only thing that comes out of this process is helium gas. And helium gas is a perfectly clean, inert substance that doesn't even react with anything. You know, we could fill party balloons and blimps with the helium gas if you want to. Or if you have too much of it, you just let it loose and it goes to the top of the atmosphere and goes out into outer space. And 24% of the universe is made of helium, so you wouldn't even be polluting outer space. So this is the most remarkable breakthrough in science in 1,000 years. And it's just around the corner. And if we make it work, this will be the greatest boon to mankind that anyone can imagine.
We have enemies out there, Robert, that simply don't want us to have that freedom, that luxury, that kind of power. You know, it's like the whole free electricity thing or magnetic motors. You know, I've had people say, yeah, I can build one, but it's against national security. So obviously they don't want us to have any type of technology that removes them from the grid. I mean, it's like I could picture Morgan saying, but where do you put the where do we put the meter? How do we deal? I mean, we're on a scientific basis. What you've discovered is, and what scientists have discovered, are ways to totally set us free, to make us independent. But we also have powers out there that profit off this oil business. Well, I mean, I've got one gentleman that wants to run for president. He says he wants to run under the platform hemp and hydrogen. I mean, hydrogen is is the most plentiful thing out there. We could actually, and the technology is here, you could throw a hose over the side of a ship and power the whole ship with the technology we have right now today. But that obviously that's not being done because they want you to buy.
No, that wouldn't work.
It wouldn't.
Hydrogen is a battery. It's not an energy source.
Okay.
So hydrogen is a way of storing energy, but it's not a way of generating energy. If you throw your hose over the side of the ship, you're going to, and you suck water into the vessel, that's not energy. You need to separate the hydrogen from the oxygen.
Yes, sir.
And when you recombine hydrogen and oxygen, you release the energy. But you only release as much energy as it took to separate them in the first place.
Okay.
So you can store energy by separating hydrogen and oxygen from water, just like you would store energy if you charged up a battery. But that costs you every bit as much energy as when you recombine them and you get the energy back. In fact, if you don't do it with 100% efficiency, then you're losing in the process because you're going to get less back than you put in. And no machine works with 100% efficiency, so this is not a solution to a problem. Now, hydrogen fuel cells will have certain applications because there are times when you do want to store energy. You want to create energy at a power plant and you want to use it in your car in a location. So moving energy around and storing it is a very important thing to do, but it's not fundamentally a new source of power. The source that I'm talking about is a new source of power. It does create energy from the conversion of mass, which is the only way that you ever get real energy production. And it is at least 10 million times more efficient than what we're doing now. Probably 40 million times more efficient. Which means you only need 1/40 millionth as much fuel as we do now. Now that fuel is going to be annihilated in the process. It's going to be converted from some massive object into useful work energy. So that fuel is going to disappear, and that's good. We get the energy out, and we don't create any pollution because the fuel disappeared. It didn't leave a waste product. It leaves only helium gas. And the name of this new technology is called LENR, L-E-N-R. And it stands for low energy neutron reactions. And this is the process that is very similar to what happens in a star. Taking small atoms, merging them together to make bigger atoms, and releasing vast amounts of energy in the process. And this is not something that's going to be tremendously complicated. And it doesn't require, this great big nuclear reactors that run at millions of degrees and hundreds of atmospheres of pressure or any of this other stuff. This is something that's simple enough that it would be small enough and safe enough that you could actually hold one of these things in your hand. You could have.
Now, let me stop you for just a moment. We hear about. I saw a chart the other day about how many nuclear weapons we've got. China's got, Israel's got, Russia's got, and we know what happened with the nuclear plants in Japan that's threatening us right now with the overflow from across the Pacific. What was the reason for building these things anyway? I mean, didn't they recognize the danger of it? And is the technology that you're talking about sufficient to allow us to close these dangerous plants down? And we got a lot of these nuclear power plants right along the New Madrid fault line, and doesn't that represent a great danger to the people of the United States or the people of the